Hi, my name is Peter. Welcome to the workshop here at Sunny Beaches. In this video, we're going to cover the table saw feature of the MiniMax CU300 Classic combination woodworking machine. If you haven't watched the first video in this series, which is an introduction and overview of the machine, I would suggest you watch that first. In a lot of ways, the table saw feature of the CU300 is similar to what you'd find on a quality American table saw. But there are some differences, and the Europeans have different ways of approaching some things, and we'll talk about all of those. The table saw will accept up to a 12-inch blade. It has a 5/8 inch arbor, which is a standard American size, so there shouldn't be any problem finding blades that will fit. There is a splitter that raises and lowers with the blade. That's fully adjustable, so you can get it lined up exactly with the blade, and it holds the setting well. You may notice there's a hole in the top of the splitter, which is there to accept this blade guard. And this is where I'm supposed to tell you that I've removed the blade guard for demonstration purposes. But in fact, I hardly ever use it. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't. With a 12-inch blade installed and raised as far up as it will go, there's just over 3.5 inches of cutting capacity. As with most American table saws, there is a crank handle here on the front that's used to raise and lower the blade in the splitter. The blade will also tilt up to 45 degrees. To tilt the blade, you install one of the two crank handles that comes with the machine on the end of a shaft here on the left-hand side. You would then loosen a locking knob and turn the crank to tilt the blade. There is a gauge on the front which will show you the approximate angle of the blade. You shouldn't, of course, trust it to be really accurate. There are positive stops at 90 and 45 degrees. I found those to be accurate from the factory, so I didn't have to mess with those, but they are adjustable if need be. Once the blade is properly positioned at the right angle, you would retighten the locking knob to lock it into place. As you can see, the blade tilts towards the rip fence, which I find to be a little unnerving when doing beveled rip cuts. Let's take a look at what we can see under the table, which actually isn't very much. To access the main blade and the splitter, move the slider all the way to the front end of the machine. To change blades, you need to remove the throat plate, which is held in place by 4 machine screws. The splitter, as I mentioned, is fully adjustable, and it is also removable. One of the reasons you may want to remove the splitter, of course, is if you're going to install a dado blade. The machine will accept up to a 3/4 inch dado stack, though MiniMax says you are not supposed to tilt with a dado blade installed. There's a separate throat plate provided for use with a dado, although the standard throat plate will work with a 1/4 inch dado installed. The rip fence that came with my machine is 1 meter long. The ripping capacity is 32 inches. This is a short fence that I use when I'm using the rip fence to index crosscuts. You want it pulled back. I got this at when I attended a class at the MiniMax facility in Austin, Texas. They've since moved to someplace in Georgia. I don't know if something like this is still available from MiniMax. If it's not, and there are two machine owners who would like a shorter rip fence, they could always team up and buy a long rip fence and cut it in half. The fence can be repositioned front to back by releasing these two levers and sliding. The fence can be used in either a horizontal or vertical orientation. The fence rail does have a ruler on it that is calibrated in both inches and centimeters. You position the ripping width by sighting down the surface of the fence to the ruler below, which works pretty well when the fence is in this vertical orientation, not so well when it's in the horizontal orientation. There is a micro adjust feature, which occasionally comes in handy. The fence rail is removable. And I usually have it off when I'm not using it because otherwise I tend to bump into it. When I do have it off, I find that I need to tighten up these handles just a little bit, otherwise they'll vibrate loose and fall out on the floor. If you ever find you need to make an adjustment in order to set the rip fence parallel to the table saw blade, the place to make that adjustment is here. These two bolts that control the space between the rip fence rail and the jointer outfeed table. You can, of course, just leave this in place all the time, but if you do that, in order to raise the jointer outfeed table, which you need to do to use the planer, you'll need to remove the crank handle that raises and lowers the table saw blade, and they give you an extra hole in the front panel to store that in. I think that covers the rip fence, so let's move on to crosscuts. There are actually two crosscut fences that come with the machine. We'll talk about the longer one now and cover the other one when we talk about the shaper. The longer crosscut fence is used in conjunction with a table that attaches to the slider, so we'll mount that first. The table is supported by this swing arm and by a slot in the side of the slider. This bracket gets mounted in that slot. And then you can just drop the leg of the table onto the swing arm. The table has two tabs that register in the slot on the side of the slider. These are adjustable up and down, but I've never needed to touch them. Once the table is in place, you just tighten these two handles to firmly clamp the table to the slider. As I said, this is the longer of the two crosscut fences. It's about 5 feet long and can be extended further. It attaches to the table with two bolts and handles. The bolts have square heads that slide in a channel in the aluminum fence. There is also a stop block held in place with a set screw here in the channel as well. And when the fence is installed, it's slid towards the blade so that the stop block comes up against the square base of this bolt, which allows for repeatable, accurate cuts. When this machine was delivered to me, this crosscut fence was configured differently than it is now. Basically, the relative positions of the stop block and the inner slide bolt were reversed, with the slide bolt being further away from the blade than the stop block. What that meant was, when the fence was installed, the only direction in which it could slide was towards the blade, which was pretty useless. So, following the advice of my MiniMax salesman, I reversed the relative positions of those two pieces so that now the inner slide bolt is closer to the blade than the stop block. This did require repositioning the stop block, which was a little fussy to get set accurately in its new position, but it was worth the effort. So what this means is now when the fence is properly installed and set, if you loosen up the handles, you can pull the fence away from the blade. There are two primary reasons you may want to do this. One is if you install a dado blade. The dado blade basically stacks out in this direction, and if I was unable to pull the fence back a little, I'd saw into the end of the fence. Not a good thing. The second reason is, well, say you're doing a series of crosscuts, and for some reason you find you need to do a rip cut. So long as that rip cut won't require more than 8 inches of clearance on this side of the blade, you can just loosen up the handles and pull the fence away from the blade and go ahead and do your rip cut. And when you're done, slide it back and tighten it up. And save yourself the trouble of having to remove the fence completely from the machine. To do 90-degree crosscuts, the fence is attached to the table using either a set of holes here closer to the front of the machine or another set of holes here closer to the back of the machine. If the fence is mounted here, the maximum crosscut capacity is about 40 inches. If the fence is mounted closer to the back of the machine, the maximum crosscut capacity is about 6 feet. We talked about how the stop block in the fence allows for repeatable, accurate setups with regard to the ruler. That's part of the fence. Now we're going to touch on how we get repeatable, accurate setups with regard to the fence being set at 90 degrees. Notice that the 2 outer holes in the table for mounting the fence are actually slots. This allows for adjustability. At the outer corners of the table, there are set screws hidden behind plastic caps. These can be turned with an Allen wrench. These set screws project through the frame of the table. The fence attaches to the table, as we've said, with the 2 sliding bolts and the 2 handles. The outer handle has a steel collar at the top, which will register against the set screws, either here or here. There are several methods for checking to ensure you're getting accurate 90-degree cuts. For instance, there's the 5-sided cut method. I'm not going to go into any of those in detail here, but whatever method you use, if you find you're not getting accurate 90-degree cuts, then you need to go through a process of tweaking the set screws and rechecking and retweaking until you're satisfied with the results. Once you have the stop block properly set to ensure accuracy of the fence ruler and the set screw set to ensure a 90-degree setup, the process of installing the fence involves dropping the 2 sliding bolts through their respective holes, attaching the 2 handles and tightening them until they're just a little loose, then slide the fence gently towards the blade until the stop block registers against the inner handle. Pull the outer end of the fence towards the set screw until it registers against the collar on the outer handle, and then tighten the 2 handles. It should be dead on every time. Of course, not every crosscut is at 90 degrees. To make beveled crosscuts, you would put the outer sliding bolt into this long slot in the center rather than these short slots at the outer corners. Either of the 2 inner holes can be used for the pivot point. The fence can be rotated between 0 and 45 degrees. There is a scale of angles here built into the top, which is not adjustable and shouldn't be depended upon for complete accuracy. The machine comes with a pair of nice beefy stops, which mount on the top of the fence. To mount them, just open up the extension a couple of inches and they slide right into place. To position them, Just sight down the leading face of the stop to the ruler below, and then tighten the knob to lock it in place. These stops can be used on either side of the fence. To use a stop with the fence extension, slide the stop onto the end piece and set it so that it's flush with the inner edge. When it's in position, lock the extension in place by tightening the knob underneath. At full extension, this stop would be 250 centimeters, or about 98 inches from the blade. The CU300 comes with a heavy-duty clamp that can be used to secure workpieces to the slider. The clamp consists of two main components, the post and the head. The post can be positioned anywhere along the length of the slider using this slot. When it's in position, just turn to tighten. The head can be slid up and down the post to accommodate different thicknesses of wood. There's a spring in this part of the assembly that tends to pull the face of the clamp up, and the handle is on a cam, and when it's pulled toward the post, it forces the head down. Generally, to set this, I'll just let the head fall to the workpiece with the handle in the vertical position and then lock it in place. This way, when the clamp is released, the workpiece can be moved, and when the clamp is tightened, the workpiece is held firmly in place. I actually have two of these. I purchased a second one at that class I took in Austin. Having two can be handy in a couple of different situations. One is sheet goods, where you're dealing with large pieces. And the second is, it comes in handy if you need to put a straight edge on a board that was milled with a live edge. The final aspect of the CU300 we're going to talk about in this video is the scoring blade. A scoring blade is a small secondary blade that's used to reduce the likelihood of tear out or chipping. It's most commonly used with sheet goods. This is the scoring blade that came with the machine. It's a one-piece unit. The teeth are shaped like trapezoids. They're tapered, narrower at the top and wider as you get closer to the center. The purpose for this design is that you can adjust the width of the kerf the blade will make by adjusting the height of the blade. The higher the blade, the wider the kerf. The reason that's important is because you want the kerf the scoring blade makes to be the same width as the kerf the main blade makes. The problem with this design is that you need to reestablish the proper height of the blade every time you use it. After you're done using it, you would lower the blade to get it out of the way, and you've lost the setting. And the next time you go to use it, you have to, again, reestablish the proper height to get the proper width kerf. This is the blade I use today. It's another piece of gear I picked up at that MiniMax training course. Here we have kind of a mini stacked dado. There are two pieces with teeth, and you can adjust the width of the kerf that the blade makes by adding and removing shims. So once you get this to the proper setting for your main blade, so that both blades are making the same width kerf, it's set, and you wouldn't need to adjust it again, unless of course you change main blades to a blade with a different width kerf. I have no idea if this style blade is available from MiniMax currently. I will put a part number for the blade in the comments section on YouTube for this video, so you could try tracking one down if you felt like it. The scoring blade is here, closer to the front of the machine than the main blade. Usually the scoring blade is positioned well below the surface of the table, and you can just safely ignore it when you're not using it. It's in its fully raised position now, and there's about 1/8 of an inch of blade that's exposed above the surface of the table, so not a lot. Note that the scoring blade rotates in the opposite direction from the main blade, so you want to make sure the scoring blade is mounted with the teeth facing the rear of the machine. Adjustments to the scoring blade are made here using these 3 holes in the surface of the table and Allen wrenches. The scoring blade is raised and lowered through this hole that's furthest from the blade. What's happening beneath the table here when you turn this wrench is that you're driving a set screw through a fixed portion of the scoring assembly against a portion of the scoring assembly that pivots. So you're basically pushing down on the side closer to the front of the machine, which has the effect of raising up the part of the assembly that's further from the front of the machine, which then has the effect of raising the blade. So when you do this, you're working against several springs. There's one built right into the scoring assembly, which works directly to keep the blade down. Also, the belt that drives this whole mechanism has a spring that keeps tension on it, which also has the effect of pulling the blade down. So to raise the blade up, you're working against both of those springs, which is a bit of tension, and the fixed portion of the assembly that the set screw, that's threaded for the set screw, is not very thick. And the upshot of all this is, if you're not careful, you can end up doing what I did, which is to strip the threads in that fixed portion. What I did to correct that situation was to drill and tap for the next thread size, 10 millimeters. And that worked. There was just enough room to be able to do that, but you probably want to avoid being in that situation if you can avoid it. So be careful with this. The hole closest to the blade is where you can adjust the scoring blade left and right. There's a cam under there, so as you turn the wrench, the blade will go left, and as you continue to turn, it'll come back to the right. Obviously, there's some trial and error involved in getting that lined up exactly where it needs to be. But once you do, put the wrench in the center hole and tighten to lock everything in place. In theory, you should never have to revisit this adjustment again. We'll do a couple of test cuts to demonstrate the effectiveness of the scoring blade using a piece of scrap cabinet grade plywood. First, without the scoring blade. I wasn't sure the camera was going to show this, but it's actually making it really much worse than it looks like to the naked eye. But there's quite a bit of tear out there. And now a cut with the scoring blade raised. Well, again, it looks worse in the camera than it does to my eye, but there's obviously much less tear out when using the scoring blade. I have a project in the house for which I require one board. So I'll use this project as an opportunity to actually demonstrate the features of the CU300, starting with the table saw, which we'll use to take this rough sawn board and cut it down to close to our final dimensions. And the first step in that process is we're going to put a straight edge on this board. I don't have an exact width in mind for this board, but we've got some pretty bad checking going on about 6 inches from the edge we just milled. So we'll go ahead and set up the rip fence for 6 inches and rip it at that. I neglected to mention when we were discussing the rip fence before that the scale on the support rail is not adjustable. It's pretty close, but it can't be right for everyone because it's going to be thrown off by different kerf thicknesses on whatever blade you choose. So, as I said, it's pretty close, but if you need it to be dead on, you're going to have to measure independently. I hope you noticed during that rip cut that I was standing over here to the side of the machine, not in front of it. My body was, for the most part, not aligned with the blade, which is a good thing. Okay, now we have to do a cross cut. I've determined that things get a little squirrely with defects in the board up at this end, and I only need 40 inches. So I've set the stop to 41, just to give me a little extra. We'll square up this end and then, flip the board and trim it off. And of course, for crosscuts, you're nowhere near the blade. So that's about as far as we can take this project with the table saw. We will next move on to the jointer and planer. Thanks for watching.